The escape pod shuddered as it entered the moon's atmosphere. Inside, Nari gripped the safety handles tightly. Her blue skin glistened with sweat as warning lights flashed around her. She was young for a Navaran, barely into her adult years, and this was her first mission away from home. Just hours ago, she had been aboard the diplomatic vessel, excited about her role as assistant to Ambassador Taiho. Then came the attack, sudden and fierce. In the chaos, Taiho had pushed her into an escape pod. "Remember your training," were his last words before the pod launched. Now, as the small craft plummeted toward the barren surface below, those words seemed hollow. Her training had never covered crash landing on a hostile moon in human territory. Pod's computer sparked. "Warning. Landing systems compromised," it announced in the Navaran language. "Impact in 30 seconds. Nari closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to the stars. The impact came with a deafening crash. Her body slammed forward against the restraints, then back again. Something sharp cut across her leg. The world went dark. When Nari opened her eyes, the pod lay on its side. Purple blood, her blood, pooled beneath her injured leg. Pain shot through her body as she tried to move. A piece of metal had sliced deep into her thigh. With trembling hands, she applied pressure to the wound. Outside the cracked viewport, she could see a desolate landscape of gray rocks and dust under a pale sky. This moon was lifeless and cold, and firmly in human-controlled space. For a Navaran, like her, this was the worst possible place to be stranded. The humans and Navarans had been locked in a cold war for decades. If human patrols found her, she would likely be captured, maybe even treated as a spy. The thought made her silver eyes widen with fear. Nari checked the pod's systems. Communications were damaged but not completely destroyed. The emergency beacon could still send a weak signal. She hesitated before activating it. The signal might bring rescue, or it might alert human forces to her presence. "No choice," she murmured to herself, pressing the button. With great effort, Nari dragged herself to the supply compartment. Inside were basic medical supplies, a water purifier, emergency rations for 3 days, and a small heater. Not much to survive on, but better than nothing. She cleaned and bandaged her leg as best she could, wincing at the pain. The cut was deep, and without proper medical attention, infection would set in soon. Navaran biology was resilient, but not invulnerable. Night fell quickly on the moon. The temperature dropped dramatically, forcing Nari to activate the small heater. She huddled close to it, wrapped in the pod's thin emergency blanket. The stars visible through the viewport were arranged differently than they appeared from her homeworld. She felt very small and very far from home. By morning, her leg had swollen. A fever began to burn through her body, the first sign of infection. Nari tried to stand but collapsed back with a cry of pain. She was trapped in the damaged pod with dwindling supplies. The second day was worse. Her vision blurred. The pain in her leg became a constant fire. She rationed her water carefully, taking tiny sips when the thirst became unbearable. The distress signal continued to pulse weakly into space, but no response came. By the third day, Nari drifted in and out of consciousness. In her fevered state, she saw visions of home, the crystal towers of the Navaran capital city, the twin moons that hung in their violet sky, her parents waiting for her return. "I'm sorry," she whispered to these phantoms. "I tried my best." During a moment of clarity, she heard something outside the pod, a mechanical sound like an engine. Fear gave her a burst of strength. She reached for a piece of broken metal to use as a weapon, though she knew she was too weak to defend herself. The sound grew closer. Then came footsteps crunching on the rocky ground outside. Nari held her breath as shadows fell across the cracked viewport. Someone or something was directly outside the pod now. The emergency door creaked as it was forced open from the outside. Light flooded in, temporarily blinding her. When her vision cleared, she saw a figure standing in the doorway. unmistakably human wearing a military uniform. The human's face was hidden behind a breathing mask, but Nari could see the eyes studying her with surprise. This was it. She had been found. But whether this meant rescue or capture, Nari was too exhausted to know. Staff Sergeant June stared at the strange signal blinking on her monitor. The pattern was unmistakable, Navaran in origin. Her fingers hovered over the alert button that would notify her commanding officer at Outpost 47. Military protocol demanded immediate reporting of all alien signals, especially those from potential enemy craft. Instead, June switched off the YAO alert system and copied the coordinates to her personal device. 3 years had passed since she lost her brother Minho. His science vessel had crashed in Navaran space. He had sent distress calls for days while diplomats argued over rescue permissions. By the time they agreed, only his body remained. "I won't let that happen again," June whispered to herself, glancing around the empty communications room. She checked the duty roster. Most personnel were busy preparing for the general's inspection tomorrow. Perfect timing. June signed out a medical kit from the infirmary and requisitioned a rover for perimeter inspection. "Should be back before dark," she told the young officer, manning the vehicle bay. The moon's terrain was difficult to navigate, all jagged rocks and steep inclines under a pale, hazy sky. June's rover bounced and jolted as she followed the signal, growing stronger as she approached its source. After 2 hours of driving, she spotted it, an escape pod half buried in loose soil at the bottom of a small crater. Navaran design, sleek, and curved unlike human craft. The pod showed heavy damage from impact, its hull cracked in several places. June parked the rover at a safe distance and approached on foot, hand resting on her sidearm. She circled the craft once, looking for any signs of danger before trying to open the damaged door. It took all her strength to force it open. The stench hit her first, the sweet metallic smell of Navaran blood. As her eyes adjusted to the dim interior, she saw a young female lying motionless against the far wall. Blue-tinted skin, silver eyes now dull with fever, purple blood staining improvised bandages on her leg. Not a soldier. Not even an adult by Navaran standards. The alien. Girl's eyes fluttered open at the intrusion. When she saw June's human form and military uniform, terror flashed across her face. She tried to back away, reaching weakly for a piece of metal to defend herself. "Easy," June said, removing her breathing mask and raising empty hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." The Navaran girl watched her with suspicion, clutching her injured leg. Up close, June could see the wound was badly infected, the skin around it turning a dark blue. June slowly opened her medical kit. "I'm a medic. I can help." With that leg. The girl didn't respond but didn't resist when June moved closer with antiseptic and fresh bandages. As June worked, she noticed the girl wore simple clothes with a small insignia, the mark of the Navaran Diplomatic Corps. Not military, not a threat. "My name is June," she said slowly, pointing to herself. The alien girl hesitated before responding, in halting human language. "Nari." As June cleaned and properly dressed the infected wound, she thought of her options. Taking Nari to the outpost would mean imprisonment at best. Leaving her here meant certain death. Both choices felt wrong. "How long have you been here?" June asked, using simple words. 3 days. Nari replied weakly. "Ship attacked. Ambassador Taiho sent me in pod." June checked Nari's vital signs. Her temperature was dangerously high for a Navaran and she was severely dehydrated. She needed proper medical care soon. Just then, June's communicator beeped. She stepped outside the pod to answer. "Staff Sergeant, where are you?" Captain Kim's voice was sharp with annoyance. "You signed out a rover 4 hours ago. Checking the western perimeter, sir," June lied smoothly. "Found some unusual mineral formations, taking samples. Return immediately. Storm front moving in from the east." "Yes, sir. On my way." June looked at the horizon. Dark clouds were gathering, just as the captain had warned. A moonstorm could last for days, making travel impossible. She returned to the pod where Nari watched her with feverish eyes. I need to get you somewhere safe, June said, making her decision. Can you walk? Nari tried to stand but collapsed immediately. Without hesitation, June lifted the alien girl in her arms. Despite being roughly the same height as a human, Navarans were lighter due to their different bone structure. Why help? Nari asked as June carried her toward the rover. June thought of her brother, dying alone on a distant world while politicians debated. Because it's right, she answered simply. As they reached the rover, the first lightning bolt split the darkening sky. The storm was approaching faster than expected. They would never make it back to the outpost in time. Hold on, June told Nari as she secured her in the passenger seat. We'll find shelter and wait it out. She drove the rover into a nearby ravine just as the wind began to howl. Whatever came next, June knew her life had changed forever. She had just broken a dozen regulations to save an alien from an enemy world, and she didn't regret it for a second. The storm raged outside, pelting the crashed pod with debris and sand. June had managed to drive them back to Nari's ship just before the worst hit. The rover wouldn't provide enough protection against the moon's violent weather. Inside the pod, June checked Nari's bandages again. The alien girl watched her with tired silver eyes. Fever lower, June said, placing a cool cloth on Nari's forehead. Medicine working. The human antibiotics she'd brought weren't perfect for Navaran physiology, but they were helping fight the infection. June had learned basic xenomedicine during her military training, enough to know that Navarans had remarkable healing abilities if given proper support. Thank you, Nari said in halting human language. Why risk for enemy? June sat back against the wall of the pod. Not enemy to me, just someone who needs help. The storm howled outside, shaking the damaged craft. They would be trapped here for days, according to weather reports June had checked before the communications went down. My brother, June continued, pulling out a small photo from her pocket. He crashed in your territory 3 years ago. No one came to help him. Nari's eyes widened with understanding. She reached out a slender blue hand to touch the photo. I'm sorry. I'm not helping you because I blame your people, June clarified. I'm helping because I know what it's like to be abandoned. As the night grew colder, they huddled near the emergency heater. June shared her rations, nutrient bars and water. Nari ate slowly, her strength gradually returning. You speak our language, June observed, surprised when Nari had responded to a comment she'd made in frustration. Learn for diplomat work, Nari explained. Was training with Ambassador Taiho, first mission. Diplomat? Not military? Nari shook her head. Peace mission, secret talks. This revelation stunned June. The military had told them Navarans were unwilling to negotiate. Yet here was proof they were reaching out. By morning, the storm still raged, but Nari's fever had broken. She sat up without help, examining the pod's damaged systems. Maybe fix communication, she suggested, pointing to the wiring. Together, they worked on the console, Nari directing with her technical knowledge while June handled the physical repairs her injured leg prevented her from doing. Hours passed in focused silence, broken only by brief instructions or questions. When June's communicator suddenly beeped, they both jumped. She stepped to the far side of the pod to answer it. Staff Sergeant June, report your status immediately. Captain Kim's voice crackled through static. Safe in a rock formation, she lied. Rover took damage in the storm. Your tracker shows you haven't moved in 24 hours. June's heart sank. She'd forgotten about the tracker in standard-issue military gear. Battery must be malfunctioning, she said. Storms interfering with signals. Report to base the Yaya. Moment the storm clears, that's an order. When she turned around, Nari was watching her with concerned eyes. They come for you, the Navaran said quietly. Because of me. June nodded. They'll send a search party after the storm. You go. Leave me medicine. I not tell them you helped. The offer touched June deeply. This alien girl was willing to risk her own survival to protect her. No, June said firmly. I'm not leaving you. That night, as they shared the emergency blanket for warmth, Nari told stories of her homeworld, the floating cities, the crystal forests, the 3 moons that lit their nights. June described Earth's oceans and mountains, the places she hoped to see after her military service ended. Our world's not so different, Nari observed sleepily. No, June agreed. Not different at all. On the 3rd day of the storm, they managed to repair the pod's scanner. It picked up chatter from the military base. Search parties were being organized. They would deploy as soon as weather permitted. We have maybe 1 day after storm ends, June calculated. Before they find us. Nari's leg had improved enough for her to stand with support. She hobbled to the viewport, watching the winds begin to calm. Where can we go? She asked. June pulled up a map on her device. There's an abandoned research station 20 kilometers north. It has better medical supplies, maybe working communications. Communications to call your people? Nari asked, confused. No, June said, making her decision final. To call someone who can help us both. Someone who will understand what you were trying to do. The storm finally broke at dawn. Outside, the landscape had changed. Rocks shifted, new formations created by the powerful winds. It would make tracking more difficult for the search parties. Can you walk? June asked, packing essential supplies. Nari tested her injured leg. With help, yes. As they prepared to leave the relative safety of the pod, Nari grasped June's hand. The gesture transcended their different biologies, their different worlds. Together, Nari said in perfect human language. June nodded, squeezing the blue hand gently. Together. The morning after the storm revealed a transformed landscape. Sand and debris had created new dunes and filled old ravines. June studied her map, trying to find the best path to the abandoned research station. 20 kilometers, she muttered. In normal conditions, we could make it in a day. Nari stood beside her, leaning on a makeshift crutch June had fashioned from pod debris. Her blue skin looked less sickly now, but her injured leg still couldn't bear her full weight. I slow you down, Nari said, concern in her silver eyes. We go together or not at all, June replied, adjusting her pack. She had filled it with their remaining water, medical supplies, and emergency rations. Ready? They set off across the barren terrain, moving slowly but steadily. June kept them close to rock formations whenever possible, knowing they would provide cover from both the harsh sun and any search drones. By midday, they had covered barely 5 kilometers. Sweat beaded on June's forehead as she helped Nari over a particularly difficult stretch of loose rocks. The moon's gravity was slightly lighter than Earth's, but the constant strain of supporting another person was taking its toll. Rest, Nari insisted when she noticed June's fatigue. Please. They found shelter in the shadow of a tall rock formation. As they shared water and a ration bar, a distant humming sound made them both freeze. Drone, June whispered, pulling Nari deeper into the shadows. The search drone passed overhead, its sensors sweeping the ground below. For tense minutes they remained perfectly still until the machine continued on its programmed path. They looking for you? Nari asked when the danger had passed. For both of us now, June said grimly. My commanding officer will know I've gone AWOL. They pressed on as the small sun began its descent. The temperature dropped rapidly as darkness approached, a dangerous feature of this moon's atmosphere. They needed to cover more ground before stopping for the night. Tell me about Earth, Nari requested as they walked, partly to distract herself from the pain in her leg. June described the forests near her childhood home, the changing seasons, the animals that lived there. Nari listened with fascination, occasionally comparing Earth's features to her own world. We have forests too, but trees are purple and silver. They sing when wind blows. Their conversation died when Nari suddenly stumbled, crying out in pain. June caught her before she fell, but the damage was done. Her bandage showed fresh purple blood seeping through. The wound reopened, June said, helping Nari to sit. She checked the injury and reapplied medication. We need to stop for the night. They found a small cave formed by fallen rocks. Inside, June used the last of their heating packets to warm the space as night temperatures plummeted dangerously low. 7 kilometers today, June noted, checking her device. Not bad, but Nari's condition worried her. The alien girl's temperature was rising again, a sign the infection might be returning. They had used most of the antibiotics already. During the night, Nari's fever worsened. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes speaking in her native language. June stayed awake, applying cool compresses to Nari's forehead and monitoring her breathing. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Just a little further tomorrow." Dawn brought new challenges. Nari was too weak to walk. Without hesitation, June lifted her onto her back. "What doing?" Nari protested weakly. "Carrying you. We need to reach the station today." The journey became a test of endurance. Step after painful step, June carried Nari across the unforgiving terrain. Her muscles burned, her lungs labored in the thin atmosphere, but she refused to stop. Near midday, their luck ran out. The distinctive sound of a military rover echoed across the rocks. "Down," June hissed, sliding with Nari into a narrow crevice between boulders. The rover passed less than 50 meters away. Through a gap in the rocks, June recognized Captain Kim himself leading the search party. They were being hunted by the highest authority at the outpost. When the danger passed, June checked her map again. 10 more kilometers. We need to change course. They're patrolling the direct route. The new path would take them through a region of unstable ground, an area marked as hazardous on her map. But they had no choice. The afternoon became a nightmare of shifting sands and hidden sinkholes. Twice June nearly lost her footing, which would have sent them both tumbling down steep inclines. Nari had fallen silent, conserving her strength. Her breathing was shallow, her skin hot to the touch despite the cooling afternoon. Just as the sun began to set, they crested a final ridge. Below them, partially covered by sand and thyme, stood the abandoned research station. Its solar panels still gleamed in the dying light, suggesting some systems might still function. "We made it," June said, her voice hoarse from exertion. Nari stirred on her back. "See it," she whispered. "Thank you." With renewed determination, June carried her precious cargo down the slope toward potential salvation. Behind them, in the day, distant searchlights began to sweep the terrain they had just traversed. The race wasn't over yet. The abandoned research station loomed before them, half buried in moon dust. June adjusted Nari's weight on her back and approached the main entrance. Years of disuse had jammed the door, but June forced it open with her shoulder. Inside, emergency lights flickered to life, powered by solar cells that had continued charging all these years. The air was stale but breathable. June carefully laid Nari on a dusty examination table in what appeared to be the medical bay. "Hold on," she told the Navaran girl, whose silver eyes were clouded with fever. "I'll find supplies." The station had been abandoned in a hurry years ago when funding was cut. To June's relief, many supplies remained, including advanced medical equipment and, most importantly, a working communications array. She found antibiotics specifically designed for non-human biology in a storage cabinet. After administering them to Nari, she turned her attention to the communications console. Military channels would alert her superiors immediately. Instead, June accessed a private frequency she hadn't used in years. A face appeared on the screen, a human man with kind eyes and a surprised expression. "June, is that really you?" "Hello, Day," she said to her old academy friend. "I need your help. No questions asked." Day now worked in the diplomatic corps, one of the few humans authorized to communicate with Navarans. He listened as June explained the situation, finding Nari, learning about the secret peace mission and their desperate journey to the research station. "This could change everything," Day said when she finished. "If what she says is true, there are people on both sides working toward peace." "Can you help us?" June asked. "I'll arrange a diplomatic shuttle, but June, you know what this means for your career." She glanced at Nari, who was sleeping more peacefully now as the medicine took effect. Some things matter more. While they waited, June used the station's equipment to properly treat Nari's leg. The wound began to heal once the correct medication was applied. By morning, Nari was awake and aware. "You saved my life," she said, watching as June changed her bandage. "Why risk everything for stranger?" June considered the question. "Maybe I'm tired of this conflict. Maybe I wanted to prove we can be better than our leaders think we are." Nari's hand reached for hers. Though their fingers were shaped differently, Navarans had only 4 digits. The gesture of gratitude needed no translation. "My mission was peace," Nari explained. Ambassador Tejo carried important message from our High Council. Proposal for ending conflict. "And now that message is lost," June said sadly. Nari tapped her temple. "Not lost. I memorized everything. Was my job as apprentice." Hope surged through June. Perhaps their journey hadn't been in vain after all. The station's alarm suddenly blared. Outside, the distinctive sound of military rovers approached. "They found us," June said, checking the security feed. Captain Kim had arrived with a full squad. Just as the first soldiers approached the entrance, a new sound filled the air, the powerful engines of a descending ship. On the view screen, June saw a sleek diplomatic vessel landing between the station and the military rovers. Day had arrived just in time. "Can you walk?" June asked Nari. The Navaran nodded, standing carefully on her healing leg. Together they made their way to the airlock. Outside, a tense standoff was underway. Captain Kim stood with his soldiers on one side. Dai and a team in diplomatic uniform stood on the other. "Staff Sergeant June," the captain barked when he saw her. "You are hereby arrested for desertion and harboring an enemy combatant." "This is not a combatant," Day interrupted smoothly. "This is a diplomatic envoy, and she is now under diplomatic protection." June supported Nari as they walked toward the diplomatic ship. Captain Kim moved to block their path. "You've thrown away your career," he told June. "Everything you worked for." June met his gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, I found something worth more." Aboard the diplomatic vessel, medical staff immediately took Nari for treatment. Day led June to a private cabin. "What happens now?" she asked. "You'll both testify before the Joint Council. If what Nari says is true, this could be the breakthrough we've needed for decades." 6 months later, June stood in the Great Hall of the Peace Station, watching as human and Navaran representatives signed the preliminary accords. Across the room, Nari stood tall and proud in formal diplomatic attire, her once injured leg now fully healed. When the ceremony ended, Nari approached her. "My people have saying," she said, her human language much improved. "The strongest bridges are built by those who were once divided by the widest rivers." June smiled. "We have a similar saying on Earth." "I have news," Nari continued. "They are forming joint humanitarian team, humans and Navarans working together to help those caught in conflict zones. They ask for us both." "Partners?" June asked. "Partners," Nari confirmed, extending her 4-fingered hand. June took it without hesitation. Their unlikely friendship, born of desperation and kindness, would now help others find their way across the divide between worlds. Outside the station's viewport, the stars shone on all their worlds equally, indifferent to the artificial boundaries drawn by those who lived beneath them.